Well, hey everybody, I am finally at the new place. I haven't moved in completely yet, but I'm finally, it's kind of echoing here. I'm going to try to figure that out as best as I can possibly. It's a little different. The environment is really strange. I'm really excited to show you what I've got. For my picks for 1984 to 1994, today we're going to be doing another edition of the 100 Years of Movie series. I'm almost actually done to it. I'm almost at 2018, so we're almost there. By the end of the year we'll get there. But right now we're going to be tackling 1984 to 1994, and that's really what I wanted to share with you today. So before I even start this list off, I actually have a lot of honorable mentions. There's a lot more movies that I've seen. The closer and closer we get to, 2018, the more and more movies I'll have. So let's begin off with my honorable mentions. Alright, so 1984 has a stack of movies that I really liked, but did not make the cut, and I'll show you exactly what those ones are. The first one being The Terminator. This movie is amazing. This is what really introduced Schwarzenegger, at least to me. This and Predator back when I was a child. Obviously, The Terminator, you got Arnold Schwarzenegger in this classic sci-fi dystopian future, but it's in the past. It's a great film. You should definitely watch it. Alright, next is a great gangster film starring Robert De Niro, and that is Once Upon a Time in America. I really enjoyed this film. This is a Sergio Leone movie. I really love this movie, but it's really freaking long. That's also most Sergio Leone movies, if you really think about it. So anyway, check out Once Upon a Time in America if you haven't had a chance to. We're gonna drop. Next is a movie I actually recently watched this month, actually. Beverly Hills Cop with Eddie Murphy. I really love this movie. This movie was great. I need to watch the other ones maybe. I've heard this one being the best one, of course, and so I really enjoyed this movie. It's a fun take from a New York cop to LA, and I really enjoyed it. Another movie I just recently watched was Repo Man with Emilio Estevez and Harry Dean Stanton. This movie is kind of a cult movie, and I really enjoyed it. It's really trippy. I really didn't know what to think of it. It's definitely a movie that has a combination of a million different things kind of going on at once. So, Repo Man, check that movie out. Next is a film that I really, really love by John Hughes, 16 Candles. I got Molly Ringwald right there. I like this edition I got from Target. The slipcover is really, really great. Samantha Baker's, it's her 16th birthday, her family is forgot. It's a fun movie. It's one of those coming-of-age teen movies that John Hughes does, and this is a fantastic movie. This is actually one of my runner-ups. It was coming really, really close to picking this movie. Speaking of runner-ups, so picking up really, really close to my pick for 1984 This is Spinal Tap. This is one of my favorite mockumentaries of all time. I love this movie. I love metal, and so this clearly is up to 11 on my standards of films, and so I really love this movie. Check out This is Spinal Tap if you haven't. There's amazing scenes in this movie and a lot of hilarious things. I think Rob Reiner did it. Yeah, he did it, yeah. So anyway, we'll talk more about Rob Reiner later on. Next is a film that I actually really, really enjoyed. A Nightmare on Elm Street. So this is Robert Englund. I think he's the one who plays, he plays Freddy. And he just goes in your nightmares. Johnny Depp's in this movie as well. This is, I think, his film debut, yep. And so it's a really great movie. I actually think it's one of the best slashers there is. The first Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a really good movie. Alright, chugging it along, we're going to talk about Nazca, The Valley of the Wind. This is one of the few Studio Ghibli movies we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about quite a bit of them. This is a great film. It really kind of started the standards for Studio Ghibli, if I recall. This is kind of one of the first ones. This is a remake right here with the American version with Uma Thurman, Patrick Stewart, Edward James Olmos, Shia LaBeouf, and Alison Lohman. I really like this movie. It's definitely the start of Miyazaki and his environmentalism, and I really enjoyed aspects of this movie. Next is one of my favorite movies on DVD, actually, The Lonely Guy. I love Steve Martin in this movie. This movie is just hilarious. I love the setup at the very, very beginning, where he comes home and finds his wife cheating on him, and he just doesn't really even pay attention to that, and it's something you should watch. If you haven't had a chance to watch The Lonely Guy, this movie is amazing. Next, another honorable mention is the first Karate Kid. Karate Kid 2 is in here too as well. I think it came out maybe a year or two later after that. Same people who did it. The Karate Kid, the first Karate Kid, great movie. Wax on, Wax off, Mr. Miyagi. I really enjoyed this movie as well. Another classic. So another classic, talking about classics constantly, is Gremlins. I really enjoyed this movie. Definitely don't feed them after midnight. Come on, that's just the rule with this Mogwai. And so definitely don't do that. Great movie. And then, last but not least on our honorable mentions list is the debut from Ethan and Joel Coen, Blood Simple. I really enjoyed this film noir. It's a really great Criterion. It's one of my first Criterion movies that I actually owned. I quite enjoyed it, and the ending is just crazy. So we're actually going to go to my pick for 1984. I'm going to have to get my notes because I have some things to talk about. From Wim Wenders, Paris, Texas. Harry Dean Stanton's performance in this movie, as well as, and I'm going to try to not butcher her name, Nastasia Kinski. She's in several other movies. I'm going to probably put a list there. And then Hunter Carson, who is the kid in this movie. Their performances are phenomenal, especially Harry Dean Stanton. The movie kind of just starts off with this guy who's in the middle of Texas, in the middle of the desert, just kind of wanders into town. He's got like a red hat and like just looks tattered and doesn't speak. He's near mute, it seems like. And then he eventually runs into his brother, and his brother's like, "You've been gone for years." Is like, and he's just not responding to him, and he just gets him kind of comfortable about coming back in civilian life, kind of wherever he was. You don't really know exactly where he was, and so I really enjoyed how that unfolded, and it just kind of just changed on a dime. And then he starts meeting his brother's family, which he hasn't seen in years, and he also sees his son, Hunter, which I mentioned earlier. And his son, he doesn't really recognize him as his father because he's been raised by his brother, you know? And so the son really just it takes a long time for him to kind of, get used to him. And near the end of this movie where Harry Dean Stanton's character, Travis, he's trying to put together his life and piece together the loss that he had, and you see that unfold throughout the entire film. You see that character develop, and he's going to try to confront his wife, who no one knows where she is. She kind of ran off, trying to figure out what's going on. This is an extremely powerful movie, and it's 2 hours and 30 minutes. It seems like it's a slow burn, but it's all about the dialogue, all about the feelings of loss and having that connection to something that, like, this is natural for what a person could go through if something tragic in their life occurred and they don't know what to do with it, so they escape that tragedy, and that's how they deal with it. And then they're coming back and trying to, take care of it and mend those relationships. And that's what this movie's all about. And it's beautiful. It's set in this gorgeous cinematography. I haven't really even looked at my notes because I really love this movie, and I watched it for the first time this month. And that's how powerful this movie is out of all the movies I just talked about. I mean, there's a lot of great picks for 1984. And so this movie is that damn good. And if you haven't seen Paris, Texas, from Wim Wenders, great German road, I guess, filmmaker. He makes a lot of road films where people are kind of just on the road. And this movie definitely has some of those elements in it as well. I really loved Paris, Texas, and I hope you do too. That's my pick for 1984. So let's move on to 1985. I have a lot of things to talk about. Woo! 1985. Another list of honorable mentions. Let's get into our first John Hughes movie, Weird Science. I really love this movie. It's a crazy movie with Anthony Michael Hall, and you also have Robert Downey Jr. when he's like really young. I remember this being one of the first John Hughes movies that I ever watched, so it's a really great one. It's definitely one of those coming-of-age high school movies that is just kind of zany and out of control. Next is Out of Africa, Robert Redford and Meryl Streep. I really enjoyed this movie. It's a very long one, and it's definitely a romance film, so you have to be in a certain mood for it, and I really enjoyed it. And so Out of Africa is a great pick. Next is a movie that I thought may have made the cut for 1985, and that was Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters. Paul Schrader, who has written Taxi Driver, directed this movie. He also made First Reformed recently. I absolutely love this movie. This is a great autobiographical drama that is divided into 4 chapters of this Japanese writer who was right after, he kind of grew up right around World War II, and then in the 50s and 60s and 70s he saw a lot of rise to fame, and it shows the political aspirations of of Mishima, and you also see the artistic side of Mishima, the writer side of Mishima, how his philosophical beliefs bled into all of the things that he did. And there's actually a really crazy ending to this movie where I'm just going to let you check it out yourself. But Mishima, A Life in More Chapters, one of the best movies that I've seen in quite some time, and definitely one of my favorites. This is definitely one of the better honorable mentions that I'm going to be talking about. Next is a movie that everyone pretty much knows about, The Goonies, doing the Truffle Shuffle. You know, you haven't seen this movie. It's a Steven Spielberg presentation. Richard Donner directed this movie. Everyone knows what The Goonies is. A bunch of kids. It's coming of age, kind of in a way, trying to find this treasure chest to this dread pirate. And so it's a crazy movie, and it's just one of those fun movies you can put on in the afternoon. Next, we're going to talk about a lot of other movies that are pretty well known. The first one being Brazil. This one is directed by Terry Gilliam of the Monty Python troupe. I didn't enjoy this movie as much as everyone else. I will need to revisit it, but it's a crazy movie with a lot of crazy effects, and it's really fun. Next is the first Back to the Future. This is definitely a contender for one of the best movies in 1985 for sure. This is a fantastic film with you got Marty and the Doc right there, just going back in time, trying to figure out fix their life a little bit. It's a really fun movie. I love that movie. It's something I rewatch pretty much every year, and I've seen it a lot. Next is the movie that I would have probably picked for 1985 if I haven't seen something this month, and that would have been The Breakfast Club. And I have the normal Blu-ray here. I am eventually going to get the Criterion. What can I say about this movie? This movie is just amazing. John Hughes. It's a classic film that you just know about. I'm not going to really talk much about it. Last honorable mention is a tough one because I watched it all this month as well, and that is Shoah. Cloud Lanzmann's Shoah is 9 hours, and it's all documentary footage of the survivors of the Holocaust, people who lived around the ghettos, like the towns, and also former Nazis who were Nazis and still are Nazis in a capacity of sense. But this movie is really hard to watch, and not because it shows you anything, just hearing all of the tales of all the people going through all the stuff that they went through. The gas chambers and the executions and the work that they did and the hurting and the trains. It talks all about it, and it's really long, it's really lengthy. Don't watch this unless you feel kind of bad about you're having a good day. You don't want to just add to your depression. But it's a very necessary film, and I highly recommend watching Shoah, at least in chunks. I watched this over about 3 or 4 day period because I couldn't handle it all in one setting, because it's 9 hours, one, and two, it's heavy subject material. All right, so we're going to talk about my favorite movie from 1985 after all those honorable mentions, and that one is Ran. I absolutely love this Akira Kurosawa movie. This climbed to the top of my Kurosawa films. Near it, there's, I think, Yojimbo, Rashomon, and Seven Samurai. This ranks among them for me. Ran is an amazing adaptation of William Shakespeare's King Lear, except instead of 3 daughters, there's 3 sons. And so it's a Japanese warlord who, his sons, all he knows is war, and during this peacetime he's decided to divide his kingdom up and decided to give it to his eldest son. His second and third son would have different castles supporting his first son, supporting his dynasty. That goes all awry. The third son immediately rejects this entire plan and is more or less kicked out of the entire kingdom, and you have the king, which I'm going to get my notes because I want to know his name, Hidetora, who rejects his son and doesn't want to see him ever again in his life. And so that was his foolish mistake, because his first and second son kick him and his retainers, because he wanted to keep the title, and he also wanted to keep their prestige, but he didn't want to rule. And so the first and second son more or less tosses him around during the movie. It's a really long film, but it's highly worth your time. There's so much beauty in this movie. One, because it's a great retelling of King Lear. There's a lot of great shots. Akira Kurosawa was 75 years old, I believe. This is one of his later films, and so he had mastered giant landscape pieces with Kagemusha right before this in 1980, and I really love the set design. The colors are just out there. There was 1,400 costumes custom made in Kyoto just for this film. And so the cinematography, the choreography of these giant ass samurai battles, it's just a fantastic film. And it's a great adaptation, and I highly recommend it. I'm not going to give much away. If you know anything about King Lear, it doesn't end on a good note. It's a tragedy. Ran is the same way. And so definitely highly recommend checking out Ran for my 1985 pick. So let's talk about 1986, for the love of God. All right, for my honorable mentions for 1986, we have Top Gun. We have Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise. Just being as American as possible. I love this steelbook. This is like just a hilarious movie, but also very serious movie, and a very patriotic film as well. Next is a Stephen King adaptation, Stand By Me. I love this movie. This movie is a very realistic kind of setting for kids during this time period. Will Wheaton, this is where he got to start. River Phoenix was here as well. Corey Feldman, Kiefer Sutherland, and Jerry O'Connell. A lot of these kids went on to do better things, and some of them, unfortunately, like Kiefer Sutherland, or no, River Phoenix. I don't know why I was thinking. River Phoenix is gone. He's the one who's dead. Anyway, great film. Definitely rated R, but as a coming-of-age film, it's a fantastic movie. Next is a really great Vietnam film, and it has this really great image right there of William Dafoe getting shot. It's Platoon. I really enjoyed this movie by Oliver Stone, who's kind of known for his more political films, and this is definitely a political film as well, but it's also a war film. And this war film is definitely one of the best war films for the time period that it came out in. Platoon is a great movie, and it's definitely got a lot of great performances in it as well. Next is a movie that is very damn famous, and that is Labyrinth. Dance Magic Dance, you got David Bowie here in his bulge, which I'm surprised they didn't actually put in the credits. I don't know why they didn't credit that, because it has a life of its own. But this movie with Jennifer Connelly as well, just is a fantastic, fun Jim Henson kind of adventure film with puppets, and a kid disappears, a baby does, and so we're sucked into this world, and it's fantastic. If you don't know Labyrinth, I mean, I'm just repeating stuff that everyone knows. So another honorable mention is a film, another Studio Ghibli film, and that's A Castle in the Sky. Castle in the Sky. I really enjoyed this. Anna Paquin, James Van Der Beek, Cloris Leachman, and Mark Hamill. This is the American version, of course, is the Studio Ghibli film. I really enjoyed this movie. It's a great fantasy, and definitely worth checking out. All the Studio Ghibli movies are worth checking out, honestly. All right, next is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This is another iconic film that could easily be a 1986 pick, but it's not. Matthew Broderick just plays he plays Bueller, who is Ferris Bueller, who is just this kid who is he's just skipping out on school, and it's just his entire day and how crazy all that stuff is. It ends in a parade. It's a crazy movie. It's a fun movie. It's definitely one of those movies that is just a fun, just coming-of-age movie. Next is the movie that probably would have won, but it did not for 1986, at least in my heart, and that's Aliens. I really love James Cameron's adaptation from the original 1979 Alien, where it became more of an action-adventure sci-fi. I really loved this movie. It added to Alien with obviously more aliens, and you also get a really fantastic ending. But you have Ripley, who's back. You know, of course, you have one of the greatest, most iconic heroines of all time, just coming back to just kick ass, and that's what I love about this movie so much. Just Sigourney Weaver is just such a fantastic woman, and I love Aliens. Alien and Aliens, those are the ones to watch for sure out of the entire franchise. All right, so my pick for 1986 is actually a fun one for me, and it is Big Trouble in Little China. John Carpenter's, I really love this movie. I really love Jack Burton, which is Kurt Russell. He's playing Jack Burton. You have Kim Cattrall as the woman in this movie. You also have David Lopan, which I'm blanking on his name. What his real name is. I have it here somewhere. Get to my notes. James Hong, who's him. We also have Dennis Dunn. who is his sidekick in this movie. But this movie is so much fun. This is a crazy, crazy adventure of kung fu, sorcery, 80s action, 80s cheese with so much different this dialogue. I'm just going to give you some lines, some of my favorite lines in the movie. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, and the check is in the mail. He's talking to himself in this. You know what old Jack Burton always say at a time like this? And then you have the Raiden-esque character say, who? It's like Jack Burton, me. You know, it's just, it's over the top Kurt Russell, and it's just that great. I love how insane this movie is, and how much fun this movie is. That's what's so great about this movie, is it's just fun. It's not taking itself seriously, but at the same time, it's got that John Carpenter-esque element of horror to it, as well as fun, and it's just, it's one of those perfect movies that the first time I ever watched it, I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I actually watched it for the first time last year, and I've watched it again and again, and I even watched it at Alamo Drafthouse. They had a movie party, and it was one of the most fun times I've ever had. They had guns for every time anyone shot. They had a little glow stick for every time. The Raiden-esque character who came down with thunder and lightning. It's lightning. You know, that's the visible one. I'm not stupid. But maybe I am a little bit. But anyway, Big Trouble in Little China is a fantastic movie. It's just so much fun. That's why it's my pick for 1986. It's so memorable, so rewatchable. It's just a great movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely do yourself a service and watch Big Trouble in Little China. All right, we're moving on to one of my most favorite years of movies, and that's 1987. I have a lot of honorable mentions, and I'm going to try to go through them as quickly as possible. All right, 1987. Whew, there's a lot of stuff here. First thing, honorable mention-wise, Moonstruck. We got Sharon Nicolas Cage. I just recently watched this for the first time. I really had a fun time with this movie. This is just a great Italian movie, and it services the 2% of Italian that I am in my own blood. I really love that movie. Next is a fun movie that is co-written by Shane Black, Monster Squad. I really enjoyed this. Fred Decker also did, he wrote this as well. He also directed it. It's a really fun, kind of just coming-of-age retelling of Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's just a fun movie, and it's just really funny, and it's also a little bit terrifying, but not really at all. Next is, speaking of Kiefer Sutherland, we talked about it a little bit earlier, we got The Lost Boys. This is a great classic vampires movie, a teen vampires movie. Just a bunch of punk teens, and they're all on the beach, and there's vampires, and it's crazy, it's fun. Go watch this movie. All right, next is a movie that I think won the Oscar for that year, and that was The Last Emperor. This is Bertolucci's. He's an Italian filmmaker. Good God, I can't talk. This is a long movie, and I watched it a long time ago, and I really enjoyed it. It's just the lifespan of the last emperor of China, and it just shows during the Boxer Rebellion. It talks a lot about the early stuff and the fall of China. But it became a different thing as it is today. And so this is a great film. It's long, it's beautiful, has got a lot of really great set design, got great performances. Anyway, go check out Last Emperor. My next honorable mention is Empire of the Sun. This is Christian Bale's first movie. Steven Spielberg, John Malkovich is in it as well. It's really great. It's about World War II, and this kid who is Christian Bale, who is just caught in crossfires of being in Japan during this entire time, and he's just a British citizen. So check out this movie, it's really good. Alright, keep going with the honorable mentions. We got a great film by Stanley Kubrick, which is half comedy, half extremely serious, and this is Full Metal Jacket. This is an insane Vietnam film. It's definitely a psychological one as well. The opening is crazy, and it kind of just divides into two different types of film. The first half is different from the second half, but it's definitely worth your time. Full Metal Jacket is one of the best Vietnam films of all time. Check it out. And Stanley Kubrick, I mean, come on. Alright, next on this list is a fun one, and that is Evil Dead 2. This is exactly when we have Sam Raimi, who changed Evil Dead, which was kind of a B-horror movie, into finally a comedy B-horror. and they did not take themselves seriously at all, and this is when this all started, and we'll talk about Army of Darkness in a second as well. Evil Dead 2, really fun film, cult classic. Next is a great movie, a great romance movie as well. No One Put Its Baby in the Corner. We got Dirty Dancing with Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey. This movie is a great kind of just summer romance movie that turns into just an awesome coming-of-age movie, so I really like it. Next is a movie I actually just recently watched for the first time with Glenn Close and Michael Douglas, Fatal Attraction. I'm actually eventually going to get the Criterion. This is crazy, and I can relate to a lot of the stuff going on in this movie if you know what this is. I've had some exes in the past that are borderline like this, so if you know what that means, yeah. Next is a fun film with John Candy and Steve Martin, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. This is the 30th anniversary edition. I think this came out last year around Christmas time. Great movie, really fun road trip movie involving all of those things in the title. Next is another really fun film, which is one of my favorite Nicolas Cage movies and a Coen Brother movie. This is Raising Arizona. You also have Holly Hunter in it as well. And then they're all just trying to kidnap Nathan Jr. And I really love this movie. And John Goodman is hilarious in this. Nicolas Cage is hilarious in this. It's just this really funny crime that occurs and them not really getting away with it. It's down to the final two. The movie that did not make the cut that I really, really love. I really love it. It's Predator. I really love this movie so much. The Predator's up there somewhere, and he's around here somewhere. He's got, you know, camouflage on. I absolutely love this movie. It's one of my favorite action movies of all time. It's also kind of a, you know, a sci-fi. It's an action sci-fi film. I really love this movie, and I love this steelbook. I just recently got this steelbook. There's the plane underneath this, the choppa, if you will. I don't know why I said plane. And then you got you know, the scorpion getting stabbed by the knife. You got some governors in here. You got Schwarzenegger, and you got Jesse Ventura. You got Shane Black in it as well. Man, I really wish The Predator was better than it was. Man, could have been the second best thing here, but Predator 2 takes that take. I love this movie. Highly recommend Predator, but it's not my pick for 1987. My pick for 1987 will actually get an upgrade for me soon on Criterion, and that's A Princess Bride. It's one of my first reviews I've ever done. If you want to check out that came out a year and a half ago, and I highly recommend checking that out. This movie is just almost everything that I love about film. It's super rewatchable. It's relatable in the sense that it's escapism. You have romance, you have action, you have comedy, you have science fiction to an extent because of some of the creatures in this movie. You have horror in this movie as well. You have almost every element and also you have drama. You have so many different genres mixed in this movie, and it's a coming-of-age story as well, especially in the real world, because this kid is bedridden and his grandpa's reading him this story. I absolutely love this movie. There's not much I can say about it because I already did a whole review of it, and I've talked about it several times in other videos. But it's my favorite movie from 1987, and it probably will be forever. You know, so yeah, that's all I have to say about it. I absolutely love this movie. Check out Princess Bride. All right, 1988. I'm going to be quicker on these honorable mentions. First honorable mention is Akira, one of the most groundbreaking anime films of all time, and it's just phenomenal. Especially, it's an amazing movie. Next, speaking of animated films, My Neighbor Totoro. This is one of the more memorable Miyazaki films that most people know about, especially that giant Totoro right there. Really great film, and it's really something that will stick with you when you go to learn, and especially the cat bus at the end as well. Next is another animated film. It's a Studio Ghibli film, but it's not directed by Miyazaki, and that is Grave of the Fireflies. This is one of the best movies of all time, especially animated-wise, and it's one of the most depressing and sad films of all time because it happens right as the bombs drop on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And so, if that doesn't give enough context for how sad this movie is, it's two children just trying to find their way through all of that shit. It's a really great movie, and honestly, probably would be my second pick for 1988. So yes. Next is a really fun one, Beetlejuice. You have Michael Keaton playing Beetlejuice. Now I can't say it anymore. I've already said it twice, so I'm done talking about this movie. Go check out, you know, or he'll appear if I keep talking about him, Michael Keaton. You know. Next is Big, really fun Tom Hanks film. It's coming of age as well in a weird way, and a romance movie. It's just a fun movie of this kid who wishes he was bigger, and Tom Hanks becomes this kid. And it's a fun movie. Big is just, it's a classic that if you haven't seen it, you probably should. Next is a sharp deviation from fun to serious, and that's The Last Temptation of Christ. This is a Martin Scorsese film. You have really right there William Dafoe playing Jesus. This movie is controversial as shit. And it came out way before the Passion of the Christ, and I think really set the bar for that movie itself, which I still actually have not seen. But this movie is actually a dual purpose, because if you've seen Silence, which is another Scorsese film, Scorsese's always had trouble with his religion, his Catholic upbringing, and violence, and just that combination and amalgamation really shows in this movie. It has a really controversial stuff in it as well. I highly recommend checking out Last Temptation of Christ. It's a hard movie to watch, but it's a really good one as well. Next, we're switching gears to some fun stuff. One of my favorite movies of all time with Leslie Nielsen, Naked Gun. I absolutely love this movie. It's got some of the stupidest slapstick in it. I love all the one-liners in this. This is up there with me, like The Jerk and Monty Python. And I love this movie, and I love Leslie Nielsen. Great, nice beaver. Yeah. Anyway, so my pick for 1988 is my favorite Christmas movie of all time, and yes, it's a Christmas movie, goddammit, and that is Die Hard. I absolutely love John McClane, and I love this movie. It is my favorite action movie of all time. I watch it every Christmas Eve. I watch it before I go to bed. I absolutely love this movie, and I really love Hans Gruber, and I can't believe that was Alan Rickman's first role in an American kind of a film. He's playing a German though too. I may be wrong about the first time thing, but it's one of his first movies that he made, I think. But anyway, this movie is just great. John McClane's afraid of airplanes. He's just at Nakatomi Plaza because his ex-wife is there, and he's just there to visit his kids for the weekend, and he gets caught up in this party because she's staying late, and also these terrorists are holding the entire Japanese corporation, the Nakatomi Corporation, hostage, and he just happens to be there, and he's a cop, and he kicks ass and takes them all down, and it's so great. I love this movie so much. I can't talk about it enough. We can get further on to the other Die Hards. Die Hard 2 and 3 are fun. I even enjoy 4. 5 I don't enjoy at all, but this is the first 4 right here. But we're talking about the first one. The first one is almost a perfect film for me. It's one of those great films that I just can't gush enough about. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, this is my pick for 1988. Alright, moving splendidly along to 1989, so we're almost at the end of the decade. We're almost to 1990. But we're going to have some honorable mentions real quick. I'll be really quick about it because I need to stop doing this. My first one being a Daniel Day-Lewis film, My Left Foot. This movie is amazing, especially the opening shot where Daniel Day-Lewis is using his foot, and I mean this is his actual foot, picking up a record and putting it on the turntable and getting the needle and playing it. It's just, this is phenomenal. This movie is really great, and I would highly recommend it. Next is a great Studio Ghibli film, a Miyazaki film, Kiki's Delivery Service. This is just a really fun one. Check this movie out if you haven't seen it already. Next is a fantastic romance movie, and I actually know a couple people who are like this. When Harry Met Sally. If you don't know about this movie, I mean, come on. Yes! I'm not going to do it. I've talked about this movie actually in my top 10 romance movies of all time. Highly recommend it. Check it out. Next is another movie that I actually just recently watched for the first time. It is Steven Soderbergh's debut film, Sex, Lies, and Videotapes. Debut, one of his first movies, I want to say either first or second. This is a great movie, and James Spader plays a really interesting character in this movie, and I really, really enjoyed all the performances in this movie and how all the weird stuff goes down. Next is a movie that I have recently seen for the first time as well, and that is Heathers. This is a really fun Winona Ryder and Christian Slater film that's just really dark, and it's a comedy as well. It's a dark comedy. More or less, they're killing their classmates because of their popularity and how they're torturing the school, and it's just fun. And it's a really great movie, and it's a really fun coming-of-age high school film. Next is one of the greatest movies of all time with Bill Murray. That's the first Ghostbusters, and there's The Thing that just fell out by Ivan Reitman, the director. This movie is great. Got Dan Aykroyd as well, Sigourney Weaver. You have Harold Ramis and Rick Moranis as well. You got the Ghostbusters. So who you're gonna call? Definitely check out both of these movies, Ghostbusters 1 and 2. Not my pick for 1989. Next is a really fun Chevy Chase film, Christmas Vacation. Not as good as Vacation. I talked about Vacation last time in my 1983. I think that was my pick. Actually, this one's really, really fun. I actually have seen this one probably the most, actually, especially during Christmas time. This is a Clark Griswold's back with the family, and you got that great steelbook right there. Last of my honorable mentions is a really, really great one. It would have been it, but I've only seen it once in my life, and it's an Italian movie, Cinema Paradiso. It's my only Arrow release, I believe, that I own. I really love this movie, and it's a movie about people who love film. This kid who grew up in this really poor town became like a projectionist and watched a lot of the movies, a lot of it growing up, and just comes back to the town as he grows up. It's a really long one, but it's really worth your time. And if you love cinema, you should check out Cinema Paradiso, because this is an amazing movie. Just check it out as soon as you can, if you can find it. All right, my pick for 1989 is a movie directed by Peter Weir. That is Dead Poets Society. Now, a lot of people I know love this movie. I'm one of those people. I know some people who don't. But I really love Robin Williams and Ethan Hawke in this movie. And Carpe Diem is something that I always joked about, and until I watched this movie, which meant Seize the Day. You know, you have this boarding school. It's a really conservative boarding school. Pretty much no fun at all. And Robin Williams is the English teacher who's just trying to inspire these kids. These boys are all boys. It's all boys boarding school. And he's just trying to inspire them through poetry and to like live a little bit, much to the chagrin of the people who run the entire school. And so it's a dark one. There's some dark stuff that happens in the movie, but it's also a really great coming of age film, just trying to find yourself. And I really enjoyed this movie. It's highly rewatchable. Yeah, it's cheesy, but I really love this movie. Dead Poets Society is my pick for 1989 because I've seen it multiple times, and I absolutely love Robin Williams in this movie. And I love all of just, this is some of the stuff that, like, if I was in these situations, I would probably deal with it in similar situations. I would deal with it in similar circumstances, if that makes sense. Anyway, we're moving on to 1990. Let's just go through the honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is Total Recall. I really love this Schwarzenegger movie. It's crazy, it's sci-fi, and it's really fun as well. Next is a really great film with James Caan and Kathy Bates, especially Kathy Bates. And if you know what I'm talking about, that's Misery. This is a horrifying Stephen King adaptation. It's one of the best Stephen King adaptations. Misery, Kathy Bates just plays this really crazed fan of this author and has him stay over. Never makes him leave, more or less. He won't be able to leave because of how insane she is. The next one on my honorable mentions list is Home Alone. This is a great John Hughes film with Macaulay Culkin. I've seen this movie probably more than most of the movies I have in front of me. I've seen this movie about 50 or 60 times. I still love this movie because it's really fun. And what happens when a kid is home alone and these two people, Joe Pesci and Marv, I can't remember his name, Daniel Stern, just come and try to break into the house and steal shit, and they get bested by a kid, and it's really funny. Next is Dances with Wolves. Kevin Costner directed and acted in. This is a great film. It's really, really long, and this is more or less the same type of thing that you see in Fern Gully, Last Samurai, Avatar. It's someone going in to the enemy's camp and becoming one of them. and it's a great movie. Next is a movie that is under a lot of people's radar because it actually happened. That's in Awakenings. You have Robert De Niro and Robin Williams. Awakenings is about a disease, which I'm trying to think of off the top of my head. I cannot remember this one. But his patients are catatonic, and that's the patients, talking about Robin Williams' character, who is the doctor, for over like 30 or 40 years. And so they have been catatonic since they were kids, and they wake up and they're still kids because their mind hasn't caught up. But and so that's what Robert De Niro's character is. Fantastic and phenomenal performances in this movie, especially by De Niro. I love this movie. It'll put a big smile on your face. It'll break your heart as well. It's a good movie, and I highly recommend it. I think it reminds me a lot of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, except in a different aspect, a little bit more modernized in the 90s kind of sense, 1990 sense. Last on my honorable mentions list is one of the last things Kurosawa directed, and that is Dreams. These are different dream sequences that he had himself throughout his entire lifespan. I don't exactly know when. There's a lot of vignettes in here, 8 mythical vignettes. It's a bunch of shorts. A lot of them are crazy, a lot of them are really beautiful. A lot of it shows Japanese culture and a lot of Japanese mythologies, history as well. You have World War II embedded in the culture and in Kurosawa, and I really love this movie. But we're going to talk about my favorite movie from 1990. That is Goodfellas. You have Robert De Niro, you have Joe Pesci, and you also have Ray Liotta, who is phenomenal in this movie, who's the main character in this movie as well. This movie is a fantastic Martin Scorsese movie, and is more or less, to me, probably this quintessential Martin Scorsese film, and there's a lot to choose from Taxi Driver all the way to, I'm blanking, Silence, all the way to Raging Bull, to Wolf of Wall Street, to The Departed, and we'll talk about that later on, but Goodfellas. This is based on the book Wise Guy. I haven't seen this movie in a while, and I've never read the book, but I heard it's a really good adaptation of that. We have the main characters of De Niro, Liotta, and Pesci, and it's dealing a lot with from the 1950s when they're young all the way up to 1980 and the true life events that occur between all these characters, and all the life events that go on between these characters with all the drugs, all of the violence, and all of the murder as well. The reason I like this movie so much, and I haven't seen it in a while, but it sticks with me, is because to me it reminds me of The Godfather in obviously the mafia gangster film, but it feels like it's more grounded than The Godfather. It's more grounded in reality and what actually happened to a lot of these types that actually went through a lot of this stuff. And I think that's where Scorsese got this correct, especially with the performances, and a lot of it being ad-libbed and fleshed out between all these characters, and the performances are so phenomenal. I mean, look at the 3 men on the screen, and it's quintessential Scorsese as well. And I just think this is that perfect combination of Scorsese's films, where you have drama, you have violence, and you even have a little bit of comedy in there as well, especially with like Pesci, who's over the top and just crazy all the time. And I absolutely loved the performances in this movie, which I've talked about enough, and this is my pick for 1990. If you haven't seen Goodfellas, you should. I need to rewatch it very soon, but this is the best movie of 1990 in my opinion. Alright, let's move along to 1991. This is going to be a long video. Honorable mention is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. This is a really, really good one, and yes, I know it's my honorable mention. It's really, really good though. The last movie that I had watched on this list right here was Barton Fink. I enjoyed this Coen Brothers movie. It's definitely one of the lesser known ones with John Turturro and John Goodman. I really love John Goodman in this as well, and John Turturro plays this writer who has to move to LA and was really, really big where he was from on the East Coast, and is set in this really crazy situation. Next is JFK, an Oliver Stone film. I have this really nice commemorative edition, limited edition, this is the 6,821 out of the 50,000. It's a really good movie. If you haven't seen this, it's long, and it's really in depth, and it has a lot of stuff with it as well. I'm gonna put that in my lap instead of on the ground. All right, last honorable mention is Beauty and the Beast. I really love this movie. It's one of my earliest movies that I watched when I was a kid on Disney. I had it on VHS. I love this movie. It's a tale as old as time, and I really enjoy all the animation and all the songs, and just the scenery, and just it's super memorable. And I like the story as well. But does not pick my favorite movie of 1991. My favorite movie of 1991 is Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs. This movie is terrifying, and I absolutely love this cover. I actually made a video when this came out on Criterion. Check that one out, it's really good. This movie is terrifying because of Hannibal Lecter. So you have Clarice, who is played by Jodie Foster, who's an FBI trainee who is not at all experienced at all, and she is thrust into a case with Dr. Hannibal Lecter, trying to capture Buffalo Bill, who is this murderer who is killing women randomly and wearing their skin, and is really fucked up in that sense. So she's trying to get into the mind of what a psychopath would do. Dr. Lecter is that psychopath, and it unfolds from there. If you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs, I mean, I don't really want to describe it to you because it's an experience on its own. This is one of those movies that is psychologically disturbing, and actually one of the movies I watched when I was pretty young, and remember a lot of the scenes in the movie, and not really understanding what was going on and how terrifying this movie actually is. Because if you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs, you should. It's definitely the best out of all of the Hannibal movies there are, and even the show, which is a great show, by the way. You should check that movie out. Mads Mikkelsen plays fantastic Hannibal, but not as good as Anthony Hopkins, because it's a different type of Hannibal Lecter, it seems like. This movie is terrifying. I've already said it a million times. It's my favorite movie of 1991 because of how memorable it is. It's a near damn perfect film, in my opinion. The score is phenomenal. It's Howard Shore, I believe, yes. It is Howard Shore. I have my notes here in front of me. So the performances are just so top-notch, especially by Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. It's a phenomenal back-and-forth kind of performances by both. And it's something it'll keep in your memory, and it'll just maintain there. So Silence of the Lambs is my pick for 1991. All right, 1992, we're actually going to my birth year, the year I was born. So we're finally to where I've been born. This year was a great year for film, and I'm just going to go through the honorable mentions. The first one being Wayne's World. I really love this movie, Schwing, and I really love the culture of classic rock that this movie has in tell with Mike Myers and Dana Carvey. It's a fun one. It's a really fun film. Next is Unforgiven, which is a great Clint Eastwood movie with Gene Hackman as well, Morgan Freeman and Richard Harris. I really love this Western, and it kind of revived Westerns from the dead because they were just not really around in the 80s. And so this movie kind of just revived that. Another honorable mention is Glengarry Glen Ross. I really love the characters in this movie. This is a stacked cast. Al Pacino, Jack Lemmon, Alec Baldwin, Ed Harris, Alan Arkin, and Kevin Spacey. That's insane. And I really enjoy a lot of the dialogue in this movie, especially Alec Baldwin. He's got a monologue in it that pretty much just puts some people in their place. So check out this movie if you haven't. This is a great, crazy cast, and it's a good movie as well. Next are the two movies that I had for honorable mention. First one being Dracula. Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula is almost perfect. It's my favorite Dracula film. It's sexual, it's dark, it's horrific, and it's got a lot of craziness in it, and I absolutely love it. And I really enjoy Gary Oldman's character and the portrayal of Dracula. I really love that movie. Last is Aladdin on my honorable mentions list. I love this movie. Prince Ali Baba. Yeah, you know, Aladdin. It's a great movie. It's a great Disney adaptation. I'm sure they're gonna try to get it right when they make it. Now we're gonna pick my favorite movie from 1992, my birth year, and that is Reservoir Dogs. I really love this movie. It's got a stacked cast, and I'm gonna read off of Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Steve Buscemi, among so many different people. It's a diamond heist that goes wrong, and this shows you the before the heist and after the heist and all the craziness that ensues. This movie is one of my favorite Tarantino films, and it introduces us to Tarantino and his style that he has. He's got a lot of pop culture references. He's got a lot of violence, over-the-top language, and comedy as well. And they're just all mixed together in this movie. And I really love the performances, especially by Tim Roth and Steve Buscemi, and even Harvey Keitel as well. Like I said, I really love how this movie just chaos ensues, and it's just a heist goes wrong, and it's just one of those movies that just stuck with me over all these years, and happens to be my favorite movie from 1992, the year of my birth. So definitely check out Reservoir Dogs. It's my pick. Alright, we're going to talk about 2 more years, 1993 and 1994. I'm sorry this video is longer than I expected it to be, but I'm talking about a lot of movies. Alright, 1993, speed round, because there's a million movies to talk about. Rudy, really great film with Samwise Gamgee. The Piano, really great movie with Holly Hunter, who is mute, who has a piano on the beach. Age of Innocence, great Daniel Day-Lewis movie with Michelle Pfeiffer and Winona Ryder. Definitely a period piece film. King of the Hill, not the show, the movie, with Steven Soderbergh directed this movie of a coming-of-age boy dealing in St. Louis in the early 1900s. Schindler's List, the Hollywoodized version of Shoah, but it actually shows you everything, and is really horrifying and very memorable, and something you don't want to watch over and over and over again. Groundhog Day, a fun film with Bill Murray that just continues to happen. I did a review of this actually about a year ago. Sleepless in Seattle, a really fun romance movie with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. The Three Colors trilogy by Krzysztof Kieślowski. I recently watched these. I really want to talk about these movies. Red being the first movie. No, I take that back. Blue, White, and Red. Blue came out first, White came out second. Red came out in 1994. We'll talk about 1994 later on. But Blue is just a phenomenal movie. These movies are all barely related to each other. They're different stories. There's characters in each of them that make them relatable. And it all comes together in the final film of Red. This is a great trilogy, and I highly recommend it. He's the director of Decalogue, and those films are also great. This is a Polish director, really knows his stuff. Check out Three Colors trilogy if you have not seen these. These are some of the best movies that I've seen in quite some time. Miss Doubtfire, hello! Fun Robin Williams. I'm sure that's gonna get my roommates. They're gonna laugh about that. Next is one of the best westerns, especially modern ones, Tombstone. You got Val Kilmer and Kurt Russell. Really fun movie. I absolutely love how enjoyable and rewatchable this movie is. And yeah. Sandlot is one of those movies I've seen since I was a kid. My dad is really obsessed with baseball, so we've seen this movie a lot, and I really love this movie as well. It's definitely just a classic film of kids growing up and playing baseball, and I think it relates to my father's childhood quite a bit. Alright, the last 2 movies on my honorable mentions list is Dazed and Confused, and then we have Kronos. Dazed and Confused, really great Richard Linklater movie that I'm eventually going to get on Criterion. And speaking of Criterion, we got Kronos. This is Guillermo del Toro's film, Kronos. I really love this movie. It's a vampire movie. Ron Perlman's a Spanish movie. Highly recommend this movie. But my pick for 1993 is the almighty and amazing Jurassic Park. This is the steelbook of it, Steven Spielberg's movie. I mean, nothing can compete to the original Jurassic Park when it comes to this movie. This is based on the novel by Michael Crichton. And it's a really great adaptation, actually. I've read most of it, but I have not read all of it, but I know how good the movie is. Steven Spielberg directed it. We have Sam Neill, we have Jeff Goldblum, we have Laura Dern, among a million other people, Samuel Jackson. This movie is a phenomenal adaptation of the book, and happens to be my pick because of how iconic it is. There's so many different things about this movie that ever since I was younger, it's just stuck with me, and I really enjoy a lot of the things that there's a lot of fear that put is in me as a kid, and it's stuck with me. Like just having the notion of making this park with reviving all these dinosaurs out of, you know, amber and mosquitoes, the science was pretty interesting for the time period that this book was written and this movie was made. And reviving that idea and seeing the horror, the true horror of actually going through with that, and seeing how it all could fall apart, and that's how this movie goes. And it's really great. If you haven't seen Jurassic Park, I mean, come on. The Lost World, it all declines. And in my literal opinion, they all go in order. 1 is the best, 2 is the second best. Jurassic Park 3, as bad as it is to me, better than Jurassic World, and which is number 4. And then Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is the worst one of the entire franchise, the last one that just came out. Jurassic Park 3 is at least fun, okay? It's bad, but it's fun. Jurassic Park, though, it's not touched by any of the other ones. Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World, it's a good one. But we're talking about Jurassic Park. I don't know why I'm even deviating. Let's talk about our last year, okay? Finally. Alright, our last year of movies is a big one. It's got some of the greatest movies of all time in this list. I'm going to piss off a lot of people by picking the one they didn't want me to pick. We have Leon the Professional, one of the greatest movies from this year, for sure. Definitely probably my 4th favorite. There's a lot more to talk about with this one. Really great Natalie Portman performance, as well as, why can't I think of your name? Jean Reno. We have a really good movie with Tom Cruise, Interview with a Vampire. We also have Brad Pitt in that as well. We have a really fun, great movie with Kevin Smith in Clerks. We have Ace Ventura, really fun movie. And now we're down to the movies that are going to piss off a lot of people. First one being Forrest Gump. I love this movie. It's a great Steven Spielberg movie. Tom Hanks plays Forrest Gump, and it's just phenomenal if you haven't seen it. I mean, come on, you haven't seen Forrest Gump. Another one that's going to piss off people is I did not pick Pulp Fiction. I wanted to stick with one Tarantino film, this one being one of the best films of all time, for certain. I really love this movie, especially Samuel Jackson in this movie. Hands down, I love this movie, and the non-linear storytelling it tells. Alright, last honorable mention, Shawshank Redemption. I know. It's considered one of the greatest movies of all time. There's a movie I like a little bit more than it, and that actually is The Lion King, which is lighting. This movie I've seen a million times. I absolutely love this movie, and I love how it's set up. Even though it's filled with holes, and, you know, just racial holes, but I really love how this movie is, and how this movie teaches you some valuable lessons, especially letting go of the past. Rafiki, thank you so much. You got Simba, and you got Nala, and you got this entire king. You've got Timon and Pumbaa trying to help Simba reclaim his throne from Scar, who killed his father, Mufasa. I just throw a bunch of names at you, but I know you know what I'm talking about. I love this movie, and Lion King is my pick for 1994. Good God, this video is probably a lot longer than I wanted it to be. Alright, so those are my picks from 1984 to 1994. I'm really looking forward to my next 100 Years of Movie Series, 1995 to 2005. It's the last one before we get into the big leagues. Alright, what do you think of my picks? Are you mad? Are you mad how long this video is? You like my new setup? Give me a like, comment down below. Don't forget to share this video and also subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.